This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, a multi-award-winning, truly independent boutique wealth manager. Invest better with Brenthurst.
Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another and suffer the indignity of being the skunk of the world. Who said those words and when? Correct. Madiba went on to add on the 10th of May 1994, as he swore the oath of office, "Let freedom reign. The sun shall never set on so glorious a human achievement." These words spoken as South Africa formally ended the apartheid era following the country's first democratic election, a time of great hope. And as I stand here and as I listen to the speakers over the past 3 days, I, like you, sometimes wonder whether we aren't reverting to being, I think he meant the polecat of the world, but he said the skunk, same thing. And I just wanted to mention that because I do think, you referred to it, Ali, the goings-on at the Mandela Commission and in our parliament sometimes indicate that we are well on our way to going back there. So with that said, good afternoon to each of you. Thank you for staying behind. I don't know why you would give up a perfectly good Friday afternoon, but thank you for staying behind. And perhaps before I start, oh, is it Thursday? Yeah, so it is. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. Yeah. Perhaps I'll start just a few brief comments over the past 3 days. I too would like to pay homage to Neil de Beer. I met him here last year, as did Magnus, as he was telling us this morning, and I said to him, Neil, we need to sit down over a lunch. I've got a lot of questions I need to ask you, and I never got that opportunity because cancer got him first. I want to thank Sean Pesh. I don't know whether Sean's here, but he came up with the charity initiative within his Randmore Fund, and I think that that's something we should all be doing. We're all of a certain age here, guys, with limited exceptions. And sometimes we need to consider how to give back. You know, I started a charity in 2018 that looks after the police and widows and orphans of cops who are killed in the line of duty. And there's far too many of them. Hundreds per year of our cops are murdered. And it's never the fault of that little boy or girl if their mom or dad is murdered by a violent criminal, irrespective of what we think of the performance of our police. And as Ian said, and I agree with him, there are many of our cops, and we'll speak about that are doing a great job. There was a lot of talk about immigration, people asking questions, do your kids go or do they stay? I'm married to a British dual citizen. She and our 3 boys have got both passports. And I had that conversation with my kids, and I told them, you follow the opportunity. But just remember that the soil of this continent will flow thick in your veins, and you can always come back. My son, the one that Alec was referring to, who I went to watch, put 50 points on France, score 2 tries, and be man of the match. And none of that compared to the fact that when they took him off the field on that golf cart, medical cart, and the whole of Murrayfield, French and Scottish supporters alike stood and applauded. That was something that got a little lump in my throat. But that kid and his wife, Ali, my daughter-in-law, who's expecting our 3rd grandchild. Our first granddaughter is 2 years old, and there's another one on the way, and my son in Pretoria had one 2 weeks ago. But those kids of mine in the UK do not want to send their kids to school there. They want to send their kids to school here in South Africa because of the opportunities that we had. And I want to agree with those speakers that called upon the expatriate diaspora to return. I was in Hyde Park walking in 1996 on a state visit with our president, and he was wearing the Olympic team's tracksuit as he went to walk on Hyde Park at 5 a.m. And he bumped into a South African girl who was out for a run, stopped and said, Mr. Mandela, what are you doing here? And he asked her what she's doing there, and she says, I'm teaching. He said, what are you teaching? She said, science and maths. He said, you need to come home. We need maths and science teachers. So I digress, and how did it get there? Restart that clock. So I stand before you today not as a politician, certainly not as a politician, not as an academic, nor as a commentator. I stand before you as someone who spent almost 18 years in uniform, who commanded men and women in dangerous places on difficult nights in communities that had lost faith in the system meant to protect them. And I've stood over crime scenes. My first night shift, I think I was 20 years old. I got to Parkview Police Station in Joburg, and my shift commander called me. I wasn't even a full constable yet. I still had white epaulets on my shoulder because I had not yet finished my training. And he said, come, Steyn, you're going to be a bodyguard. And I thought, maybe, looking back on it now, I thought maybe that had some prophetic meaning, but it didn't. He meant I was going to go and guard a body of a woman who hanged herself in her home. And before the mortuary van got there, in order to preserve the chain of evidence, you have to have a cop who can say that at this time I arrived and I found the body, and at this time the mortuary van arrived to take him away. That was my introduction to policing, not yet dry behind my ears. But we are living in a moment, friends, in South Africa where the credibility of our criminal justice system, especially our police, has become dangerously fragile. We've heard the Madlanga stuff. I'm not going to repeat it. Political interference in the police, organized crime infiltration, and compromised leadership. That's not rumor. You heard it from Ian. That's evidence. And when that happens, policing stops becoming a public service and it starts becoming a tool for those who would seek to manipulate. And I agree with what Ian said. There is reason and deliberation behind some of the decisions that are made. So what needs to change? First of all, crime intelligence. You know what? I was recruited because I'm English speaking by the security branch in the 80s. And when Mr. de Klerk signed all those apartheid laws out of force and effect, effectively ending apartheid, which was a system of laws, as we know, the security branch or the special branch had no more work. So they changed the name to the Crime Intelligence Service. And they said, quite correctly, if you apply the same amount of effort and energy and expertise in fighting those that stood up to apartheid on criminals and criminal syndicates, then we should have a much safer country. Well, we all know what happened to crime intelligence. Secondly, training. Ian didn't mention training, but it's one of those things that drop off the radar as soon as there are budgetary pressures. And we need new blood, and I'll come to that. This is dangerous for any democracy. So let's talk about thinking out of the box. Leaders or even sports coaches say that we must think out of the box. But too often it just means recycling the same old ideas, repackaging them with a new slogan, and nothing changes. So let's start with some obvious truths. How is it that our leaders fail to grasp this? South Africa has got a massive youth unemployment problem. South Africa has a massive crime and corruption problem. Hello. We've got a stagnant economy. I'm not an economist either. And we've got a struggling public service. But we haven't connected the dots, as Alec and others have said. Why have we not asked a simple question? We've got all these unemployed graduates. How many young South Africans do you know that have gone to university and earned a degree, some of them at unbelievable cost to themselves and their parents, who actually don't have the means, and they're sitting without work? Why has nobody pulled them into a room like this, put a blank sheet of paper here, and say to these young people, if you were a policeman tomorrow, how would you change crime and policing in your community? Just ask them. You don't have to listen to them, but ask them. These are young people who in many cases have chosen education and employment that they don't have over drugs and the streets. And every 1,000 years, these graduates leave our university. I mean, every year, thousands of graduates leave these universities, and then we just leave them idle. It's tragic, but it's also irrational. So here is a practical proposal. Let's establish something called a National Graduate Security and Governance Think Tank. in every province. Bring these youngsters together. Get professional facilitators. And Prince Mashele said this earlier today. What have young people got that we don't have? We've got lots of wisdom and experience, but we don't have their energy. We don't. I'm 62. I don't have the energy I had 20 years ago. And I've got enthusiasm. How do we make South Africa safer? Tell us. How do we modernize policing? How do we close corruption loopholes? What do you see in your communities? How do we fight crime more intelligently? Guys, they are connected people. They understand data and the internet and tech way better than you and I do. How do we rebuild trust between communities and the police? Because it's the young people in our communities who trust the police the least. We're not listening to them, and we should be. Then we pair that up with former detectives, former intelligence officers, former commanders, people who do understand the system. And you bring these bright ideas and you kind of calm it all down by saying, well, let's get practical. How do we make this work? Well, ask the Mandelas. And then we implement those ideas. We don't bury them in reports somewhere. And we don't ask management services in the police to do it either. Now, let me speak plainly. South Africa has underinvested in police training over decades. So I'm driving, and Anik hinted at it, so I'm going to drop the name here, sorry. But one of my clients is Oprah. So I'm driving her, we're coming out of Sandhurst in Sandton, coming down that road that goes onto Winnie Mandela Drive at the robot there, below Saxon House. And she's talking to somebody in the back of the car that I'm driving. And I said to her, ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I said, just have a look at this here. You see these oaks in this intersection here with the reflective jackets on that are directing the traffic? I said, every single one of them is a homeless person. They've got absolutely no executive authority. Well, her bodyguard from America sitting behind me, his neck spun around like a top. And there was this, and Oprah's not short of a word. She didn't know what to say. Other than, man, your country is effed. I'm moving on here, Alec, because that's a ridiculous timer. All right, let me come to I just want to talk a little bit very briefly about logistics. Guys, we are leaving these men and women out there without the resources they need. What do I mean by that? Ian mentioned it. Vehicles that are broken down and they don't even have fuel. Radios that fail, outdated IT system, backlogged forensic laboratories. What about body-worn cameras to protect them? What about proper body armor? What about vehicles like we see in the movies? Don't think everything you see in the movies is rubbish, but why aren't our police officers out there equipped with connectivity, connected to data centers that can provide them information at the drop of a hat, so that before the vehicle drives away and there's a wanted criminal in there, we know it and we can find them? That thin blue line is something very close to my heart. There are police officers on the ground. Guys, when we sit and listen to Madlanga, who is it that's coming under fire there? It's the generals and the brigadiers. The constables and sergeants who strap on a firearm with extra rounds of ammunition and put on a bulletproof vest to go out there and protect you and me, that thin blue line is not being supported. In fact, in many cases, they're abandoned. While senior officers sit in offices, they write reports, they attend meetings, and they bring somebody to the meeting that can record what happened because they won't remember. It's a corrosive culture. And we've got too many generals. When I was a cop, okay, we can't compare it, but when I was a cop, there was one full general in the police. He was the commissioner of police, and I think there were 2 lieutenant generals. 2. Each of the 4 then provinces had a major general, and that was it. All the other specialized units and divisions within the police were run by brigadiers and colonels. Today, South Africa, correct me, Ian, has roughly 180,000 police officers, where we need 300,000, many analysts say. So the solution is not simply more ranks at the top, more fat cats. It's a smarter structure, flatter leadership, more operational command, more accountability, promoting excellence, not loyalty, and rewarding performance. I'm going to skip through Madlanga. We don't need to say anything about that. And now we come to the hardest conversation. So sorry, Alec, I'm going to still get to the protecting ourselves and our families, but this is really important to me. This is the part that demands courage at this moment. Controversial maybe, but I don't think we can carry on like we're going. What is it that they say about insanity? So some countries, not many, but some countries do this. They separate police officers entirely from politics. You may not belong to a political party if you are a cop. By law and by you signing a code of conduct when you swear the oath of office. So you serve the government of the day, irrespective of who the government of the day is. You ban police officers from belonging to political parties. When you do that, you remove their right to vote for a political party. Remove the vote from cops, but then they also don't pay income tax. Because why should they pay income tax to a government that they have no voice in appointing? And I promise you, if you say that to cops, 99% of them will say, I'll take that. I'll take that call. That's an extraordinarily brave and courageous thing to do, and it's not something you implement in 5 minutes. It's going to take special legislation, but I don't think that we can continue as we are. And I'm not saying that that needs to necessarily last forever, but we certainly need something like a state of emergency where we drastically intervene in what has happened to our police. Because South Africa is a constitutional democracy and voting is a right. So we must ask the serious questions. Why do you think, and I wonder if the Joburg people like me saw yet again the video evidence of the Deputy President's motorcade in Joburg driving up the wrong side of a one-way street in traffic because he was late. Why are those protection officers in that motorcade not called to account? Because their commanders have been appointed by the political bosses. Simple as that. Simple as that. They compromised, they captured. So, Alec, give me a few minutes here. So how do we remain safe in a dynamic and fast-changing world? Because our security environment here in South Africa is shaped not only by domestic crime, again, you heard what Ian said, organized crime from parliament poachers to human trafficking is syndicate-driven and it's global. Immigration control is a major political topic, a hot potato almost everywhere in the world. In fact, just last week, I had my 4th 10-year US visa approved. And there was part of me that wondered whether they were going to approve me because I'm South African. But I did. Thank you very much, United States. And tomorrow, the reason I'm going back, it's Friday, is I have an appointment at the Spanish embassy to get my Schengen visa in my green mamba renewed or apply for a new one. So we see this tension between Iran and the United States, and we heard what Professor Iraj Abedian said this morning, but this is changing by the hour. And I can tell you that I experienced it personally because I was going to Murrayfield to watch rugby on Emirates. And I was supposed to leave on Monday last week. And they told me my flight's cancelled. They'll make a decision on Tuesday. And I said, I've seen this movie before. I phoned my travel agent and said, get me on another flight. BA quoted me 148,000 Rand return in economy class. So they started to gouge the prices as they shut down the airspace over the United States. Eventually, I got away on Thursday on Ethiopian Airlines via Addis. And then I had to get back from there to come here to be with all of you starting on Tuesday morning. So our personal safety challenges don't exist in isolation as the world becomes more and more unstable and more unpredictable. And Alec asked me to change my talk from purely concentrating on policing, and Ian did a great job, I didn't need to do that, to talk about things that worry us today. And for me, there's nowhere else I'd rather be with my Green Mamba passport than right here in South Africa, even though I'm married to a dual British and South African citizen. By the way, we've got the best people in the world. I know many of you travel, and I think you'd agree with me. Black and white and everything in between, we have phenomenal people here. But how is it possible that we have this propensity to elect the biggest mamparas to represent us? So my purpose today isn't to create or increase fear when I tell you that the world's becoming unsafe. And security is not only the responsibility of governments and police services, it's also about awareness and preparation and just plain common sense by all of us exercising sensible habits. So the first thing that I need to say is your most powerful tool is a situational awareness. You know, when foreigners come to South Africa, I tell them, just get hold of a local South African and ask them, where is it safe to go and how is it safe to travel? Local knowledge is king, and information informs. So what do? Now I'm sitting in Addis Ababa, and I've got 3 hours before my flight leaves to London Gatwick, because I've got to speak in Jersey, not New Jersey in the United States, Jersey in the Channel Islands, the tax haven. And my talk is at 7 p.m. on Thursday. Then I've got the whole of Friday to get off that island and up to Edinburgh, and watch the game on Saturday and get back on Sunday, which became Monday. So I go to AI and I take a screenshot of my flights, I put it in there and I said, can I make this connection? Because the flight from Jersey on EasyJet landed in Gatwick at 5:40. It wasn't 5:40, it was actually 6 a.m. And my flight to Edinburgh left at 7:40. And they said, sorry, my flight, this was not the one from Jersey. This was the one coming into the country when I was allowed to go through UK immigration. I had to land at Gatwick and get on a BA flight to the island, and I had 2 hours, which was shortened when that flight was slightly late. So I was a bit worried. And I know Gatwick, and I know that there's 2 terminals, north and south. So I asked ChatGPT, does this flight coming in from Addis Ababa land in the same terminal that the one to Jersey departs from? Answers no. So I say, okay, how much time do I have? ChatGPT tells me you're not going to make that connection. So I said, okay, and it lists the next number of flights, and they were too late. So then it says to me, AI is quite sharp. It says, however, can I show you a hack? I said, yes, show me the hack. It says, okay, when you walk down the long corridor coming into the immigration hall, don't go left with the great unwashed into the arrivals hall. Keep right. Right at the end of the hall is a far set of those smart gates where you can scan your passport. Not if you have a green mamba. So that hack goes out the window. The next one says, get to the left-hand side of the plane. As soon as the door opens, get off and gap it. So I do. I arrive in that hall. I ran down that long passage, and I was the first one in there. Nobody in the hall. Straight through immigration, grabbed my bag, hightailed it to the South Terminal, and made the flight easily. But the point is, I was informed. I knew what was happening because I was prepared. So situational awareness is important. And I often use ladies coming out of shopping malls to illustrate this. You know, ladies, if you park your car in the shopping mall and you come out there and you're on the phone while you're crapping in your handsak to find your car keys to open the boot, that criminal has spotted you a long time ago. Trust me, you've got a big target on your back. Stick those keys in your handbag, zip it up. Sorry, keep your remote for your car in your hand, put your purse and your cell phone in the handbag, zip it up and clench it under your arm and walk confidently with your head up, looking around you. If you see somebody who looks like a tsotsi, look at him. Don't stare him down, but just make sure that he sees you. He's going to leave you alone. He's going to look for that other one there, crapping. Okay. Personal environmental awareness. Digital security, I don't need to tell you, there's too many experts here. By the way, I've got a lighty, the one in Pretoria who just had my grandson. He's a data engineer, and I said to him, hey, Ian, do you want to earn 50 grand? He said, yeah. I said, how? I said, go get onto Magnus's profile and unlock it. He says he'll take it on. Family preparedness. Guys, prepare your families. Don't scare your kids, obviously. But tell them what they should do in a way that parents explain to children. You know, what do we do if we can't contact one another? So I'm sitting with Glasgow Warriors in Stellenbosch last year when they came out here for the URC, and this conversation is happening amongst the coaching staff about giving children phones. And so I said to them, but guys, in South Africa, the choice of whether or not you give a teenager a phone is very often a matter of safety. And they said, no, we get that. Same in our country, but don't give them a smartphone. So what do you mean? Just give them an old Nokia. I said, do you still get those things? Yeah, they said. And when I was in Australia with Oprah, when I sent you the photograph in November, Australia just passed that law. No under 16 access to social media by law. Brilliant, I thought. Well done, Aussies. Community security, Ian spoke about it. Get involved. Get onto your community police forums. The community WhatsApp groups. Guys, there's power in those things. They're brilliant. But don't use them for chit-chat and sending stupid jokes and whatever all the time. But, a little bit is not a bad thing. And then financial preparedness, far more expertise here than I will ever have to tell you about how to secure your family and your children's wealth. By the way, I believe in children working for their own wealth. I think that SKI stands for Spend Kids Inheritance, and that's my view, and I'm rolling with that. So in closing, the world we live in today is complex and it's changing daily, it's dynamic. Geopolitical tensions affect economies and families and individuals. Technology changes the nature of crime, and public institutions face growing pressures. But individuals are not powerless. The vast majority, I can tell you, comes from simple safety habits. And I'm not being ridiculous. As a cop of 18 years and 27 years in private security, I can tell you, the best advice I can give you is lock your flippin' windows at night and make sure that your door's locked and that your alarm is set. Play the what-if game. Please do this. When you're driving down the road, coming into your suburb, and it's Friday afternoon tomorrow, and you're ready for the weekend, you're going to watch rugby lacquer, look in your rearview mirror, pick a vehicle, and say, what if those are hijackers? What am I going to do? Just do that. Because I promise you, the day that something happens to you, you won't do nothing. Even if what you do is not necessarily the best thing to do, you won't freeze like a deer in the headlights. I've got a former police colleague who does this kind of training as a profession. And he says, I want to find that place called nowhere. I said, what do you mean, Richard? He says, because every time I speak to a hijacking victim, they say that they came out of nowhere. Play the what-if game. Okay. So let me close, Alex, sorry. I didn't join the police to become rich. In 1982, having graduated high school, matriculated in 81. To be perfectly honest with all of you, I joined the police initially because I didn't want to waste my time with 2 years in the army. And if you joined the police for 4 years, then my national service was considered paid. They paid me a bit more. I didn't have the marks to earn a bursary, and my dad didn't have the money to send me to university. And he was a single parent who raised me and my 2 brothers. So I joined the police for 4 years. Because then I could study a tertiary qualification while I was a cop. But then a strange thing happened, and I learned to serve. I learned what it means that cops are called to their tasks. And most cops I worked with did too. And again, I have to agree with Ian, and those who remain in the police, that thin blue line, by and large, still do, ladies and gentlemen, in the main. But they need leadership. They don't need mamparas there, compromised, colluding with their political masters before a portfolio committee meeting in Parliament. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But they also need protection, and they need our support. They need systems that reward integrity. And what I have proposed today might be radical, but I don't think it's that irrational. We need to use our graduates. We need to professionalize training. What I mean by that is crime intelligence should be studying the behavior of criminals and saying to the criminal division, this is what we're seeing. I mean, crime intelligence should be telling the training division, this is what we're seeing from criminal behavior. The training division should be active in every province, in every police station, and saying, hey, this is what crime intelligence are seeing as trends. This is how you beat it. This is how you avoid becoming a victim of police killing. That's not happening. I can tell you it's not happening. Ask Ian. We need to flatten those bloated hierarchies, and we absolutely need to depoliticize policing. We need to protect the independence of our men and women in blue. They should have no other master but you and me. That's who they serve, and our children. So the Madlanga moment has given us a warning. It's not just about individuals, it's about systems. We can ignore it, ostriches and all that, or we can act. And I love what Prince Mashele was saying today. Let's get involved. I love what Wayne Duvenage was saying today. Don't sit there. If we can act, we can rebuild a police service. And I'm delighted. I need to tell you that I rejoiced when you stood up to Bheki Cele that day, and that thing went viral. I rejoiced in your courage. And what I'm talking about today demands courage. There's an example we can follow. If we act, we can rebuild a police service that serves the constitution of our country, not perfect, the people of our country, and justice, without fear, without favor, without political masters, and that is the police service that South Africa deserves. Thank you very much.
This BizNews production is brought to you by Brenthurst Wealth, a multi-award winning, truly independent boutique wealth manager. Invest better with Brenthurst.